the size of this thing, I don't think anyone's expecting that coming down the pike.
The nation gets behind, no, we got to develop this, like going to war in
Yeah.
World War II, then the result of that is who gets squeezed? It's the people.
If we're going to spend $5 trillion on AI, there's not going to be enough power.
What can also give is democracy.
What's the real end game for AI? I'm not talking about how good the AI models are going to get or what stocks are going to go up. I'm talking about the upheaval that AI will cause over the next few years. I've got a guest today that's telling an AI story that I know you haven't heard before. Not just job losses, not just productivity gains, it's much more than that. And it's a story you've got to hear. This is Top Stocks. And today we're not talking about a single stock, but we're talking about a much bigger picture. In particular, an idea my guest today calls World War AI. It's the AI story you haven't heard. Today, I'm in Miami at the Future Proof Citywide Conference, and I got a chance to sit down with Ben Hunt for a conversation. Ben writes incredible essays at Epsilon Theory. He's a political scientist who ended up running hedge funds, and now he's the co-founder of Prescient, which is a way to understand the stories that are shaping history as it happens. I'm an investment analyst and economist with over 2 decades of experience, but more importantly, I have a huge, experienced research team at Stansberry Research that has done all kinds of incredible things. They've predicted the dot-com bubble and the financial crisis, recommended Berkshire Hathaway at $56, it's at $500 now. Recommended Nvidia in 2016, Bitcoin in 2017. This is just what we do. Late last year, Ben wrote an essay called World War AI, which is phenomenal. I've read it several times. And when I found out he was here in Miami at this conference, I wanted to ask him all about it. So Ben, thank you for joining me.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. So people have very divergent views on AI. You know, there's people who are positive on it and say it'll increase productivity and that improves everyone's lives. There's all different ways to be negative on it, I think, whether it's just not going to work or it's going to kill everybody or whatever your view might be. You, I think I would say, are negative on AI, but it's for a different reason. It's more a matter of like the scale of this issue than the other things people are worried about.
So I'm on both sides of this, right?
Okay.
So my company is an AI company,
That's true.
right? So our I got my PhD back in the 80s doing some early work on inference. So I'm a believer in applying non-human intelligence.
Okay.
I don't even like the word artificial because it's not artificial, it's just non-human.
Okay.
Particularly to access the world of semantics, of meaning, of language. These large language models, they are native applications. They live in this semantic dimension.
Okay.
That's
And wait,
I'm
can I
anthropomorphizing a little bit, but that's how they see the world. They see the world through a probabilistic connection of the meaning of words.
So can I try and define semantic for people at home? And I'm sure I won't get it exactly right. But this semantic is like the structure of stories and how we think. So it's kind of like begin, middle, and end, cause and effect, like good and evil, sort of. And the way we build stories out of those concepts is semantics.
It is. And semantics is really just, it's a fancy word to mean, what does it mean?
Okay.
What does it mean? I can tell my wife I love you. That means something similar and also something a little different than when I tell my daughter I love you, or a friend, I love you, man. Right? So I'm using the same words, but they have different meaning, and that's semantics.
Okay.
Each of those people who heard that me say I love you, they get it.
Okay.
And so what is so powerful about these LLMs is that they're not just doing word search. They're actually able to probabilistically assess the difference in meaning for when I say I love you to my wife, to I love you to my daughter, to I love you to a friend.
Okay.
Right. So it's meaning And it's meaning that is both connected to words, to text, but is also deeper than that. And these are tools that understanding the context, the meaning of words is not just important in our day-to-day lives, but it's also so important in our investing lives. Because you think you can hear meaning in what you're reading on social media or what's being told to you on television. Meaning can be hidden a lot of times. And so seeing through the surface level of words and getting at the meaning, it's never been more important. The phrase I like to use for this is, why am I reading this now?
Yeah, I love that question.
Because there's meaning for the presentation of words to you. There are, call it an ulterior motive. There is motivation and affect behind the choice, and it is an active choice of what words to present to you to describe this company or describe this policy or about anything.
Yeah.
And once you start being sensitized to that, to the meaning that's behind the words, that's how you start to see things differently and I think more clearly.
So it makes me think about, people read a Fed statement and you could read the Fed statement and go, okay, that was interesting. But when you take it and you say, oh, well, last time he said rapidly growing and this time he just said growing, right? You're building more semantics around it. Or if Sam Altman comes out and says our models they're better than ever, and you stop and go, why am I hearing that now, right? Is he fundraising? Is it true about the models? And you gotta try and figure all that stuff out.
Perfect example. So that, I'll call it word analysis, word by word analysis, was state of the art, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. Let's look up how many times the CEO mentioned AI in the earnings transcript.
Yeah, just literally counting words.
Literally
at that point.
counting, right? Let's do a Google Trends on this and see if it spiked up or it went down. Let's do sentiment analysis. Are they using nice words or mean words about something? Or did they put in an adverb, rapidly growing or not?
And there was real edge in doing that. On transcripts or things like that. It's maybe a speed edge.
So yes, there was absolutely a speed edge. And so what a lot of the stat arb funds who are trying to make decisions, arbitrage decisions between the way things were and the way things are now within a sub-second time period, they were very active in doing that very quick linguistic analysis of change in wording. And it does work. I think it's small. I think actually sentiment analysis works poorly as a signal. And the reason why it gets back to this level of a deeper meaning, right? Why were these words chosen?
Yeah.
Right? Because the words are chosen for a reason. And it's getting at that reason, that motivation. What's the meaning behind the word choice that we're actually now able to get at through LLMs? It's not a deterministic setting where I'm counting words. What LLMs allow you to do is a probabilistic assessment. Now, for the probabilistic assessment to really mean something, you need lots of text. It's lots of different vectors that come at this question of meaning from a lot of different places. And a well-trained LLM that's trained on so much information has good probabilistic sense of what things mean. And if you can then present it snippets of, chunks of text at scale, it's really good at picking up I'll call it the semantic residue of real meaning, not just word search or word counts.
So what before we talk about World War AI, this is what you're doing at Prescient.
Prescient.
Yeah,
it's a made-up word, right? Yeah, so it means to see through, which is what I'm talking about here. And, you can use technology to do it. What it really is just, I say, developing some critical distance in the way you read.
Yeah.
I read the same stuff everyone else does. I think I read a little bit differently because I'm always trying to read at that one level of removal. Why am I reading this now? What's the motivation behind the words that I'm being presented with?
But what if I understand Percy right, it's you're kind of able to track. I'm simplifying quite a bit. You're kind of able to track the global conversation and understand what topics are coming, like are kind of growing on their own, and people are starting to think in this particular narrative or that narrative.
Yeah, so it's funny because I was doing the same thing 35 years ago, but I was like hiring grad students and paying them and giving them a roll of dimes to go make copies on microfiche.
Oh my gosh!
Right, I was coding in the data to a this will be gobbledygook to most of your audience to a digital equipment, a deck mini frame, where I would get the results the next day.
Yeah,
and so everything has changed except the math. The math and the tools we use to understand dissemination of data and semantic graphs, that math hasn't changed. No one's invented cold fusion.
Yeah.
Right. What has changed is we get everything that's published in the world overnight.
Yeah.
Just these pipes of, call it big data. And then more importantly than big data is big compute. I mean, the ability to just tap into AWS and get as much computing processing power as you want. It's magic. It changes everything because the math and the calculations are not complicated, really. You just have to do them at massive scale. I mean, we've processed over 1 trillion tokens, trillion with a T, over the last 6 months. And it costs money, but it doesn't cost that much money.
$1 trillion does sound like pretty expensive, but well, what's a narrative that's on the rise now? That's maybe an important one that people have started talking about in the last few months that wasn't in the cultural.
Sure, I can give you a couple. So specific for our world, our investment world, and like you mentioned, we're here at this conference for financial advisors. Well, financial advisors over the last 3 years for sure have just been flooded with offers for private equity, yes, but a lot of private credit. So all these different private credit funds, put your clients in them, make an investment here. If the financial advisors in the audience know what I'm talking about, they'll get 3 or 4 of these emails from Wall Street firms, a week. And what we were able to track up in the storytelling around this, and it's very similar to what happened with the build-up to the great financial crisis, where mortgages were packaged into securities in the same way that lending is now packaged into securities. That's what private credit is. And that's what financial advisors, they get, buy our security, which is a package of loans.
Okay.
In the same way that in 05 and 06, you were buying securities that were packages of mortgages. It's exactly the same thing.
Okay, sounds scary already.
Well, and it is, right? Because it follows exactly, this is what we do on Wall Street. You take a good idea and you take it too far.
Yes. You just heard Ben mention securitized loans in private credit. And this is an important thing that a lot of people don't understand. Loans used to be between a bank and a borrower, and it was a personal relationship. But if you securitize them, you take a bunch of loans, you package them up, and then you can sell them like a bond or a stock to all kinds of investors. So it's less personal, but it's more market-oriented. And this has a big effect on the way that companies borrow money and the interest rates they pay. This is important for you to understand, and it's exactly the kind of stuff we cover at Top Stocks. Top Stocks is here to help investors better understand the market and better understand stocks so that they can be a confident investor. If you want to learn more, you can sign up completely for free at topstocksletter.com.
So what you're able to track in the storytelling because you start to see dormant narratives start to pick up and pick up. Oh, these alternative asset managers, their exposure is concerning. You see more and more articles that are just talking about that, or even if they're not talking specifically about that, you can understand that there's meaning behind their words. It's saying, I don't know about this. Very small at first, spikes up if there's a little thing, dies back down, but you see the growth in this.
Yeah.
Storytelling, it follows these historical patterns. So you're able to see, this is when it started to get squirrely in 2007. If you're able to see it, if you're able to see these narratives grow and you can identify, okay, this was the same pattern, you can just, again, just maintaining critical distance and, take a beat and take a step back. So the pattern of this, you ask kind of what's now, right? So this is kind of played out with the alternative asset managers and the investment banks who were originating, packaging, and selling this. So all of these companies, their stocks are down, anywhere from 35 to 50% over the last year. Well, the narrative that's growing now is, who are the entities that have been buying this stuff?
Okay.
And this is, again, exactly the same pattern that happened in the GFC. So the first companies that got slammed were the mortgage originators like Countrywide, the servicers, the bundlers, and the packagers. And then it went from there to who owns this crap?
Right.
Even if it's not crap, if it's presented as crap, that's where the danger lies if you're invested in a company that owns it.
A lot of people don't realize in the financial crisis, almost all those mortgages were fine. Like the securitization kind of works, but it was just so much leverage and everyone was scared they didn't know who owned what.
You got it.
Yeah.
Right. And so when people get scared, they want their money back. And so it becomes a liquidity problem where you can't satisfy the people say, nah, I'm sure it's fine, but give me my money back.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening now.
In private credit.
In private credit.
Yeah.
And so, which is why the managers of those funds, they put up gates, meaning they put up limitations on how much money you can take out. They do other things. And doing that just makes everyone else, even if they're in something that's actually going to be okay, say, I don't have to be in this, give me my money back.
Yeah.
So it becomes a liquidity issue, which is death for financials.
Okay.
But the financial place where this is going towards is for the life insurers and annuity writers who own so much of this. So that's the narrative we're tracking right now, and you can see it grow. And I don't know what the default rate is. It would probably be fine. I don't know what reality is, but I know how reality is being presented.
Yeah.
And the presentation of reality is going to shift the spotlight away from the originators and the securitizers of these loans towards the insurance companies and particularly the annuity writers who own this stuff.
The way these stories unfold reminds me of, like, if you ever watch a zombie movie and there's always this part where there's people and they're in the car and on the radio it's like, there are strange reports coming out of so-and-so, and then they're like, oh, I'm sure that's nothing, and they turn it off.
Right.
Yeah. And it's just always the same thing. They do that in every one. But, so there are times when these narratives build up and there's like a tipping point mechanism to them that I've never been able to pinpoint. But, there was banks a couple of years ago, the regional banks looked really scary but then it doesn't spread into other things. And so these things kind of come and a lot of times they are contained. Commercial real estate was the same thing after COVID, and people are getting real worried, oh, these are all going to get washed out. And there were losses in that sector, but it wasn't a big contagion. Is there a way that you can tell when that tipping point's coming? I haven't been able to find it.
I think so.
Yeah.
Right. And this is what I'm getting at when I'm calling these new tools, and why I am a believer in AI. And I want to get back to your original question.
I did. Yeah, we'll get there.
On AI. But these LLMs, and they're being, again, native to the semantic dimension. That's where they exist. They provide the ability to get so much more, I like to call it resolution
Okay.
and precision on
Okay.
measuring. So you can see when something rolls over, when something is dormant and it picks up. When the other side of the story starts to grow in
Yeah.
influence, it's like discovering the microscope. And so you suspect that germs are real,
Yeah.
but when you can actually see it, then you say, okay, yeah, germs are real. And then you start doing the work to see what germs cause what diseases and how does it actually work. So we're in that stage right now because the LLMs were key to building a microscope with sufficient resolution to actually see these critters. And it's funny, I've been immersed in this world of narrative so long that I really do think of them as alive, right?
Yeah.
As entities that have a life cycle, and they split or they merge, and they are a non-human life form.
Yeah.
They really are. And this gets to the worry or the negativity. So it's an incredibly powerful tool. I feel, I don't like to use this word a lot, but I do feel blessed to live in a time where this tool is now available and it's being subsidized by all of these
VC.
And I really mean that because the subsidization of this means that we can process 1 trillion tokens and we can actually do that. I don't know if, in fact, I doubt it is going to be possible to do that even within a couple of years. Right now, our token processing cost is heavily subsidized by the competition between the big 3 or 4 who are doing this. It's like, in the early days, when Uber was just starting out, Uber was being so heavily subsidized. Oh, it'll cost me $5 to get to the airport? Great.
Yeah.
And now I look at an Uber to go 2 blocks and I go, what the hell is this?
Right. The venture capitalists were funding losses, essentially.
We're funding losses.
Yeah, and they're doing it now.
And they are absolutely doing that right now with our cost for processing. So I feel strongly that kind of TikTok pressure to use this miracle tool.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Now, just to every degree we can. It's not even a worry. It's you see it happening even today, is that the next step here is for the Borg to, the man, to control AI and LLMs. And that is control over both building it out and the enormous energy consumption that it requires in a world where, or in a country where our energy infrastructure is poor. You can't build it fast enough because you may have the nat gas, but you don't have the turbine to generate electricity.
Yeah.
The demands on power generation are inescapable to continue developing AI, and that comes at a cost of less energy for us, the meat.
And this was the most compelling part to me. You had a great analogy to World War II because of the size of this thing and what people had to go through during that time, which is just, I don't think anyone's expecting that coming down the pike, but it sounds very reasonable. So tell us about that.
It's energy and it's capital. Again, not a world we're familiar with, right? Where certainly over the last 20 years, there's been a flood of, again, I'll use the finance term, liquidity.
Yep.
Central banks, putting enormous amounts just of money in the world. That tide of money flooding the world is coming back in because you have so many demands on that liquidity now. Not just the AI infrastructure build out, which is trillions of dollars. Also, every developed country in the world running these massive budget deficits where they've got to borrow to spend the money they got to spend. Reshoring of industry requires trillions. There are demands on capital and energy, which are these tectonic plates, and they are shifting in a way that this mixes metaphors poorly, but squeezes us.
Yeah.
Squeezes us. So if that's the goal, if the nation gets behind, no, we got to develop this, like going to war in
Yeah.
World War II, then the result of that is who gets squeezed? It's the people.
Yeah.
So there's rationing, there's price hikes, there's price controls. I see all of that happening, and we're not at war, right? This is a choice.
Yeah. But the scale, if you,
but the scale is
the
of a
scale
war.
is of,
Yes.
I think if you're calling it 4 or 5 trillion on inflation adjusted, that's what World War II costs.
And the language is war language too.
The language
which is
is
my particular interest.
That's
right?
the narrative
So
part.
It's couched in terms of we are in a fight. This is the
It's a
AI
war with
wars
China.
with China.
Yeah.
And so we've got to make sacrifices, and we've got to, if they die, they die, right? And
Yeah.
so that was, Trump's quote around,
Oh yeah.
casualties, and
Yeah.
Again, not to get into the Iran war, but that's a war of choice,
Yes.
right? It's not a war of necessity; it's a war of choice. Could be the right choice. I don't want to argue that.
Right.
It's a war of choice. Ditto with the choices we're making over the scale and scope of AI development,
Mm-hmm.
and the language in which that is presented as conflict, as war, because that's what has meaning to us as Americans. Yeah, I want to win a war,
Yeah.
but there's motivation behind it, and that's what I want to talk about in that article.
Yeah. Okay. So required reading, The Good War by Studs Terkel. Have you read this one?
Oh, absolutely. So
Yes.
one of my early things with Epsilon Theory was I made a reading list. I should do
Yeah.
it again. But so The Good War by Studs Terkel, and he wrote a couple of books like
Yes.
this, right? So one was on the Great Depression, one was on World War II. But his style is he's just allowing people to talk
Yeah.
about it in their own words.
It's a huge book, but every 5 pages is another person, from a cook on a ship to a general to an enemy to a wife at home, and just their story of World War II. And it's amazing what they
magic.
went through.
It's
It is.
magic, right?
Yeah.
And so I can't recommend this type of history more, because it isn't just, I'm going to interview the great man,
Yeah.
which I like those kind of history books too.
Mm-hmm.
But this is, what was it like to live? What was the meaning
Yeah.
in that you pulled from life then?
Yeah.
And it's a series of vignettes, and it gives you a feel in a way that reading a history book usually doesn't give.
Yeah. And it's also, I'll get back to AI, but the other thing is to read and to not know the end of World War II while you were in it is so, it's so hard to wrap your head around that. But the reason that's important now, so if I can follow this argument, if we're going to spend $5 trillion on AI, there's not going to be enough power. There's not going to be enough capital. And that means your mortgage rate might go up, right? There might be less hiring if people don't have access to credit. And so
something's got to give.
Something's got to give, right?
Something's got to give. And, what could give could be these plans around the AI buildout, right?
Yeah. Maybe it doesn't happen.
That could be what gives.
Yeah.
Right now, all I'm saying is that something's got to give.
Uh-huh.
The consequences of any one of these things giving is enormous, and we don't know what the outcome is, but we sure as hell need to plan for or prepare for one of those things giving. And so what does that mean? We don't want to get locked into an investment portfolio
Sure.
that assumes that all of this can happen without something giving and there being a problem somewhere.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as a free lunch, ever.
Right. And the narrative side of this is that to perhaps justify why we're doing this and perhaps justify the sacrifices people might have to make is it's not just business. This is a race with China because we're in an AI war with China.
Well, and this is my fear, right? So we want to say what I'm negative about is that what can also give is democracy, right? So there's a way to solve for energy allocation preferably to AI infrastructure build-outs
Okay.
and maintaining food production and food costs and all that other stuff. We just have to stop having elections.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a crisis is a time to grab power.
So you present it as a war, and so emergency action, sacrifices must be made for the war.
We'll have elections next year.
Well, when the emergency is over, we can go back to this.
Yeah.
And so that is my ultimate concern, that of kind of the different things that can give here.
Yeah.
One of the things that can give is actual representative democracy.
Yeah.
And if I were a betting man, and I am, right?
That's true.
I feel like that feels like, it's not certain, and all these things can change, but that sure as hell seems like a path we're going down.
Risk
right
is
now.
high. All right, so it's uncertain. We don't know exactly, but let's explore what those sacrifices might be, because people, like you said, the water you swim in, people don't always understand capital and what it does and what it brings to their lives, and so much. We're talking a lot about books today, but Vladimir Smil has a book, How the World Works, and his intro is, look, you get natural gas coming into your house, you get concrete coming,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody, like, it's 1% of the world understands how any of these things get made, and everyone else just kind of sits and says, oh, it arrives. So if there's capital crowding out, is the economic term, like moving to AI and not moving to other things, how can that change everybody's life if there's so many sacrifices to be made? What are we going to sacrifice?
I think your electricity bill goes up.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. No matter what they say about it not going up, it's going to go up, or it gets rationed in the sense of brownouts. We're already seeing that happening, and it's just going to continue. That's just everyday people. It's the cost of energy you're going to see go up. I'll say the other one is everyone's an investor today. If it goes the other way, where the tech companies aren't allowed to build out in the way they want to build out, I mean, the market's going to have a problem with that, because so much of the market is around the efficiencies and the productivities that AI can bring.
Another narrative that I see coming out of this is that, and I picture this happening even as this next midterm election comes up, is the tech giants being painted as, and perhaps justifiably, but as the bad guys, right? Yes, your power bills are up. It's because of those tech companies. Yes, people are getting fired. Well, it's because of those tech companies. And I feel like there's going to be a rising narrative to you use them as the scapegoat, which, I mean, it is also their fault in some ways. But have you seen any evidence of that?
Or to pick one, to pick Anthropic. I'm going to pick on this, right?
Yeah.
So in terms of the Anthropic issues with the
DoD.
I can't bring myself to call it Department of War. But,
Oh yeah.
But okay, I'll do it. But that whole issue, right? Yes, you have to have the villain, the scapegoat. That's all part of this process too. So it doesn't even have to be the entire industry. It just has to be picking winners or picking favorites.
Yeah.
That's absolutely part of how this all goes down. It could be the tech industry. It could be something else. I think that's why China is presented, and China is a strategic competitor of ours, and I think there is an adversarial nature to this that can't be avoided. But we're not fighting a freaking war over AI with China.
Yeah.
Even if that's how it's being presented.
Okay, so I want to leave investors with something practical, maybe a
Sure.
lesson for them. And can you tell us about the Keynesian beauty contest?
Okay, sure, yeah. So, you're asking kind of how, what's the tipping point and how do things change? So, like I say, nothing that I'm talking about is new. Nobody's invented anything new. We just have better tools to measure this stuff. And so John Maynard Keynes was talking about everything I'm talking about in the 1930s as applied to markets, that it's not your research on this company that matters.
Right.
And it's not your view. It's not even what the consensus is. Oh, the consensus of economists for the next jobs number is XYZ. That's
Right.
not even it either. It's what everyone thinks that everyone thinks. It's the crowd looking at the crowd. And the beauty contest was a contest they apparently used to have in newspapers, where they'd print the picture of 15 pretty girls, and you would need to vote for who you think's the prettiest girl. And the people who voted for the girl who got the most votes, there'd be a drawing or something, and you'd win some prize.
Yeah.
A trip to, the Big Apple. And what you realized was pretty quickly was the way to win the newspaper beauty contest is not to pick the girl you think is actually the prettiest, because that's not the rules of the game. Right. You want to pick. And you also realize it's not necessarily what your buddies think either. You've got to do that third level of thinking, right? Which is, who does the crowd think that the crowd thinks is the prettiest girl? And you would think that that's kind of an impossible thing to solve for, but it's not, because what drives that is somebody. We call them missionaries in game theory. Somebody saying something that everybody hears. It's another example of this is even earlier story, The Emperor's New Clothes.
Okay.
Where everybody sees that the emperor has no clothes as he's walking down there, but that's okay. I'm saying he's not wearing clothes, and you're told that, oh, yeah, but I don't want to say anything because the crowd's looking at the crowd. What triggers the crowd to say, oh, he's naked, is that little girl, the missionary in this point, who says something that not just the entire crowd hears, but the crowd hears that the crowd heard it. It's why coronations are still held in public, why executions used to be held in public. It wasn't so that a crowd of people could see the poor guy getting hanged or had his head cut off. It's so that the crowd could see that there was a crowd of people seeing the guy with his head cut off. It's the crowd watching the crowd effect that Keynes was talking about with the newspaper beauty contest, and that's what you got to figure out as an investor. And the way to figure that out is, who are the missionaries, so that the crowd believes that the whole crowd has heard this?
Ben, explain to me what a missionary is and who those people are.
Oh, they're the people you see on CNBC or on CNN or on Fox. So a missionary is simply a famous person who, when you hear them speak, you assume that everyone else also heard them speak. So, the most prominent missionary today would be Donald Trump. That's actually, used to be the most prominent missionary in our investment world was not the president, but was the Federal Reserve Chair.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's interesting how these things change, but a missionary is a person who, when you hear them speak, you believe that everyone else also heard them speak.
And they kind of get to set what the truth is with that power, or a version of the believed truth, the common knowledge.
If you hear a missionary speak, it is rational to behave as if it is the truth. Even if you don't believe it, or you think it's wrong or stupid, if you think that everyone else also heard this, you have to act as if it has impact and meaning.
Okay. So it's, yes, you do the fundamental analysis, and that's part of it, but you have to understand what everybody's thinking and what everybody else is thinking about what everyone's thinking. And there are parts of the narrative machine who get to tell those stories either because of their position or their audience. And that's what drives the short-term movements in markets.
Not even short-term movements. Let's say you're a value investor, all right, and you say, oh my God, I've identified this thing about this company that's really valuable, and the market is not giving it credit.
Yeah.
Right? Every manager has told you this, every value investor says, oh my God, this company's got this. And That's what I do. I'm a value investor. That's my religion, right? That's what we all think we want to do, is we want to find a company that, the market's not giving it value, giving it a price on this. This is really special what this company does. And then there's a variation on that. Well, there'll be this catalyst where then the market will see that how great this is, and I'm going to buy it now, and then the catalyst will happen, or eventually the market will wake up and the rest of the world will see what I see.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that until you see the story, until a missionary starts talking about this thing as being special, it's never going to happen. It's never going to happen, right? So it's not to say you're wrong. It's that it doesn't matter. The value is not going to be realized until it gets out there, which is why CEOs try to
tell that story. Why people go on CNBC to talk their book, to say, we really like so-and-so because they've got this special thing. And what you have to understand is that's the motivation behind all the stories you hear, all the news you hear on CNBC and Bloomberg. Yeah.
The motivation is to tell you something special and to try to, like starting a snowball up at the hill and trying to get it rolling. They want to get that rolling in media because that'll make their position work.
So always ask, why am I reading this now?
Why am I reading this now? And look, so many smart people are the smartest people in the world are investors. And you may have that really smart thing. My point is, don't pull the trigger on it until you start to see that story is actually starting to take off.
Yes, I love it.
It's that discovery phase. That's when you make all your money as a value investor. When the rest of the world discovers this thing that you've known for a while.
Yeah. Okay, so AI is coming, whether we like it or not. What's one piece of advice you would give someone in their 20s to stay ahead of the curve?
What I'd recommend, and this is not just for people in their 20s, right? But it isn't to be afraid of, right? It is a blessing and a boon. Don't ask it open-ended questions.
Oh, yeah.
Don't ask it open-ended questions, because it's going to give you an answer, right? And the answer will be different tomorrow. And it prevents you from doing your own critical thinking, right? So it's not there to ask open-ended questions. It is there to be your partner, to dive in and really understand something better. And that's not just for young people, that's for everyone.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ben, for joining me.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Nothing we say today should be considered investment advice and should be used only for informational purposes.